All right, welcome everybody. Getting started a little bit later than we'd like to today, but I think that'll work out fine. Welcome, hope you're having a good fall, and thank you for joining us for the Adult Diploma Working Group web session today. First off, I want to give you the rundown of the things we're planning to talk about in the next hour and a half. So we have some announcements and updates that we will start with. We will take some time talking about another new set of diploma tasks that are available for you all to use in your programs. These are tasks specifically for the science areas. Which I'm going to pause for just a second, actually, because Christine Kelly is planning to join us to present about those tasks, but she texted me that she's having some tech difficulties. Can anybody confirm for me whether or not Christine is here?
Christine is not here.
Okay, so we'll be watching for Christine. We may have to rearrange order a little bit if she was going to try to join as soon as she can. So we'll see about that. We will take some time to talk about reviews and some recommendations that have come up from recent portfolio reviews. And then we're going to take some time to think some more about high school science courses and using those as evidence in portfolios. Kind of similar to last meeting, we talked about math, high school math courses. So that is our plan for today. I wanted to start off with just a bit of an acknowledgement. This kind of comes from a little bit of a personal place, but I suspect that some of you out there listening might identify with this. So I feel a little bit like with this work in Standard Adult Diploma, it feels a little bit like we are treading water. I'm just going to acknowledge that many of the topics and kind of announcements and updates in today's meeting are actually carryovers from our meeting in July. And in some cases, we have a little more information. And in some cases, I'm just going to tell you, yep, that's still true. So I just felt like I wanted to start by acknowledging that. I know that maybe you are feeling this as well in general, that we're just kind of in this moment where we're just trying to keep up with everything that's happening in the world right now and trying not to drown, right? So just an acknowledgement of kind of where we are. And yeah, I agree, Laura, a treadmill also would be an appropriate metaphor, or a hamster wheel, yes. All right, so I want to remind you of when we talk about Standard Adult Diploma, the different folks who are involved, it's very much a group effort, a large group effort. This whole working group has been really important, and we appreciate all of you being here. In terms of the administration and who really makes this happen on our end at the Department of Education, that is myself. I'm Jody. And Brad, who is our state director. And we'll hear a little bit more from Brad in a few minutes when we get some high seas updates. And then I want to give a shout out again to the review team. These four folks have really become an invaluable leadership team for our Standard Adult Diploma program here in the state of Minnesota. One slight change, these are the same four team members, four reviewers that we've had for more than a year now, but I just want to give a congratulations to Vicki, who recently retired from her career as an instructor in the Department of Corrections. However, we're very grateful that she is, for now, going to stay on as one of our reviewers. So she retired, but she's still on our review team, which is good news for us. So I believe these folks are with us this afternoon, and as always, review team, please chime in as you see fit. And then we have a couple of folks who do some additional support in terms of adult diploma. Carla from Literacy Action Network helps with a lot of the logistics. And then Christine Kelly from Atlas also does support specifically around ELA content. And also she's the one who's been overseeing the development of the diploma tasks, which has been a really great project. And then I just want to take a second to recognize that we have a new team member here at the Minnesota Department of Education on our team who is providing some additional support and organization to our team. And so I'm going to invite Neil to go ahead and unmute and just say a quick hello to our group.
Hi, everyone. My name's Neil. My pronouns are they, them. I'm really excited to get to dive in and work with ABE, and I don't have much with student adult diploma yet, but that may be coming. If I am in charge of the email list though, so if you're not getting emails, or if you need to change the email address you have on the list, you can reach out to me for that.
Excellent. Thanks, Neil. Yeah, it has been, I think we said this week is Neil's 6th week on our team. So it's been really great. They have been an amazing addition to our team and really, really helpful with just a lot of different things. So yeah, we're really glad to have Neil on board. And this is also Neil's, our other new team member here, that's Pip. So we're happy to have another cat on the MDE team. All right, so we are going to get started with announcements and updates. Again, a lot of these things kind of revisiting things that we started talking about in July, last time we were together. So I just want to make sure that you have on your calendars dates for our upcoming working groups for this year. So the next time we will meet will be in January, when the world will look like this picture probably. And then we are still holding out hope for the possibility that we might be able to plan an in-person working group session in April. I think we all know that is by no means a guarantee, and it's sort of anybody's guess at this point whether we will be able to do that or not. But for now, let's remain optimistic that we might be able to make that happen. So we kind of set these working group dates on a program year basis. So we have not yet set the dates starting in July of 2022, but we will work on that soon. So I wanted to circle back on what we mentioned in July, that we know that we have to shift away from using Schoology as our convening platform and our repository of documents because of the changes with Schoology and the fact that it's no longer free for new folks to get on. So that is still the plan. That work has not really gotten rolling yet, but I'll just remind you of what the plan is, and that work will be getting underway soon. So the plan will be moving forward is that we will replace the current Schoology group with 2 different sort of platforms. We'll be housing the documents that we need for adult diploma work on the Atlas website, and then we'll be using Mighty Networks to do more of the information sharing, networking kind of aspect that we used to do in Schoology. So that is still the plan. Just letting you know, the Schoology group does still exist, and it still is a useful resource for you. I have put the resources from this webinar today in a new folder under the resources section. So definitely continue to use the Schoology group for now, and we will be sure to let you know the point at which we're sort of officially closing that down. That has not happened yet. So feel free to continue using that the way that you have. But also, please be engaging in the new Mighty Networks platform, which is what across the board in our adult ed system here in the state of Minnesota, we are adopting this particular tool as a place to convene folks and share information and put out questions. So please do be using that platform, the Mighty Networks platform, and specifically the Standard Adult High School Diploma group as a place to put out questions and answer each other's questions and share ideas and resources and things like that. And thank you, Astrid, for putting that link in the chat. If you follow that link, you can get more information about Mighty Networks. And this is a screenshot of the Atlas website. So eventually, all of the documents that currently live in the Schoology group, templates and policy documents, and materials from earlier working groups, all of those things will eventually, or at least the ones that we need to keep available moving forward, those things will eventually move to the Atlas website. So again, we will keep you posted as that happens, but we are really planning for that work to start soon and to happen over the course of the next couple of months. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brad to give us some updates about high school equivalencies.
Thanks, Ash, or thank you so much, Jody. Yes, let's talk about the high Cs, or high school equivalency assessments, that we have here in Minnesota. As we have been saying via email and in past sessions, we are complete with our high Cs competition. GED testing service was awarded a contract, so GED is approved for the next 8 years. We also, through this competition, ETS and the HiSET test were also approved. Unfortunately, though, we don't have a contract finalized with them. They are still under contract review. They have to submit a bunch of additional documentation, which needs to be reviewed by the contract staff. And so that contract is still under review. So no news yet on when that HiSET contract will be signed. And as I said, these contracts will be renewed for a total of 8 years, which means we do need to do another competition, complete that competition by July of 2029. The joke that you could insert here is that we might need to get started now on the new competition. But sadly, or fortunately, we hope that the next competition won't take nearly as long. So we also want to brainstorm a little bit of what the contract means. Once an ETS HiSET contract is signed, we will work with ETS over the next 6 or more months to implement a new high school equivalency assessment system, basically setting up new test centers, creating policy for adult ed programs for HiSET testing centers, providing training on what that means as a test center, as an instructor, etc. And we'll also need to make sure that we communicate to within adult education, but also with all of our other stakeholders, that a second high school equivalency assessment has been approved. And so we're working with the Minnesota Department of Education communications staff on work that communications plan. And then within the Minnesota Department of Education, we'll need to set up and revise our own credentialing database, which is the Adult Secondary Credential System. That's an internal database that only MDE staff use to process data. Currently, we're just processing data from GED testing service and issuing GED-based diplomas. But we need to go through a process, raise some funds so that we can actually revise our credentialing system or database so that we can receive data from ETS and issue HiSET-based diplomas in the future. So stay tuned for all of those steps as we go forward. I think the key thing to note about those contract next steps, though, are that it's not going to be an instant turnout, like the system will be automatically available. HiSET won't automatically and instantly be available as soon as that contract is signed. It will be a process of 6 or more months. There will be a lot of communication. There's going to be a lot of work that will need to happen before HiSET is fully up and running here in the state of Minnesota. So don't feel like you need to rush or that things will automatically change as soon as that contract is signed. So stay tuned. And just a little bit of basics that we wanted to share as well about the HiSET. with GED, there are 4 tests. With HiSET, there are 5 tests. HiSET has broken out the language arts test into a separate reading test and a separate writing test. And then, like GED, there's a math test, a science test, and a social studies assessment. You can find out more about the HiSET assessment at their website, hiset.ets.org. We can go to the next slide. So we do have a couple of questions for you, and just kind of we want to know a little bit of what you and your diploma programs are thinking right now. What are your adult education programs thinking right now? I'd like to, if you want to share in the chat, or if you want to click to raise your hand and we can unmute, we just want to know which of your programs are currently thinking about creating a HiSET testing center when that would be available. Please just share in the chat. Yes or no, which communities might be thinking about this, which programs might be thinking about this. No commitment based on what you put in the chat. We are just curious what you are thinking currently with the programs and the communities that you're working with. So I hear from Matt that they are thinking about creating a HiSET testing center within the DOC. Castle Lake, Bena Walker, and White Earth are. Kayla is saying that they're waiting to see a little bit more what it looks like. And some other programs are undecided. Jennifer's saying that they're undecided at Lakes area. Cassie, they're saying they're unsure yet at Faribault. Kelly McGowan saying the same thing. I understand that what you're saying, Drew, that you feel like you might need some more information before committing one way or the other. That makes a lot of sense. Yep, that makes sense, Tammy, that you're a little undecided at this point. Excellent. So I think what Drew and Tammy are saying, that kind of leads us into our next set of questions. So as you're thinking about what additional information you might need, so one first question I have for you is what should be our next steps as the Minnesota Department of Education works with HiSET, and as we think about what this might mean for standard adult diploma, like how would HiSET tests fit within the competency completion options? What information do you need? So yeah, you can click on the next question. So we'd like to hear from you. What additional information do you need or do you want? Do you want a presentation from HiSET folks in January at our January Adult Diploma Working Group meeting? So please share with us in the chat. What additional information do you need? Do you want a presentation from the ETS and HiSET team? Are there other things that you'd like to see? And specifically, as you're thinking about you wanting more info, what info do you want? What is information that would help you? Some great questions here, or great information. Topics covered in each of the tests. Information about a paper option. Proctoring rules. Time per test. Startup costs, materials. How the standards tested fit into with adult diploma, okay. The differences between GED and HiSET. Some prep materials. Benefits of HiSET versus GED. Those are that's some great information. Data on the number of candidates that take paper versus online and pass-fail for both GED and HiSET. Okay. What does it look like? What does a GED test center look like? And what does a HiSET test center look like? And how are they different? Excellent. Or maybe how are they the same? Excellent. Jody, do you want to click to the next? Great question as well, Andy. Payment, how will that work? And what are the costs? Yes, that is a great question as well. So then as we get this additional information, one of the questions that Jody and I had for all of you, how do we make this decision on whether or not or how and when to add HiSET to our completion options? What would that look like? How do we make this decision? what are some thoughts? And you can, this might be a little bit hard to type out, so feel free to click to raise your hand and share if you have an idea about how we might explore embedding this into the standard adult diploma completion options. I see Amy Fish has her hand up, so I'm going to unmute you from my end. You're self-muted as well, so if you want to unmute yourself, Amy.
Well, I would think that it would be treated the same as the GED tests, because for the test-based credential, it will be treated the same. So as soon as we can offer high-set based diplomas, then we would also approve it for each subject.
And then how would you see that being different with, because the tests aren't fully aligned in that they have different subjects. There's a reading test and a writing test. So, you know, I think we made some considerations on what might be needed with writing. Yeah, so I think there's some additional concerns because they aren't fully the same.
The old GED test also had reading and writing separately, so we've got a model.
That's true. Yep. Good point. So maybe utilizing those 2002 series. That's great. Andy, you have your hand up. I've unmuted you. You're also self-muted. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that ties in like with what Amy was saying on the 2002s and with the 2014s. You know, we can look at the reading and writing part, but you'd still have to have, I don't know whether we'd require a writing sample, but there'd have to be something for the speaking and listening and those parts if we accept it into the completion options.
Yep, that makes sense. Paul is saying, Matt saying, similar to what Amy was saying, should be embedded the same as GED if it holds the same weight. And then Paul is saying that after we've had a chance to analyze, do an analysis of the contents and how it correlates with the adult diploma standards. Excellent. Wonderful. That is, Jody, is there anything more that you think I should discuss at this point in time regarding HiSET and standard adult diploma?
I don't think so, Brad. I think, yeah, thanks to everybody for chiming in at this point. I think what we know is that we should keep talking about it in January. So yeah, no, I think that's good, Brad. Should we keep going?
Absolutely, that makes sense to me. And thank you for all of your great thoughts. That definitely helps. And Stephanie, you're saying if it doesn't hold the same weight as the GED, you'd wonder how it got approved as a completion option. And I hear that thought. I'm not saying that it doesn't hold the same weight. I'm just saying that because the tests are different, there are different tests measuring different things. It might change how we approve those within the completion options, because GED does not have a separate writing test and reading test. They just have one language arts test. So knowing that HiSET has two separate tests, it might encourage us or force us to think a little differently on about what that might mean within the completion options. Okay, one other thing, just going back over to GED, the test that is currently in operation in Minnesota. I just have an update from GED Testing Service about expired vouchers, and I wanted to share that with all of you. Ideally, if your program has GED vouchers that are about to expire, we strongly encourage you, or GED Testing Service strongly encourages you, to submit them about a month or more before the expiration date in order to get the expiration date extended. If you send it if you send the code after it's already expired, please note it will take a couple of months to issue a replacement voucher. I guess the voucher team at GED Testing Service is extremely backed up, and the whole process in dealing with an expired voucher is much more time consuming and complicated than extending out the expiration date of a voucher that is not yet expired. They say it's much easier, and they strongly prefer if you could please send them a GED voucher before it expires, so that they can extend that time, the expiration. They can extend the expiration date. If you wait till after it's expired, unfortunately, what that means is they have to generate a new voucher, and it's a very different process. And I guess the team is getting really backed up nationally doing this work. So just keep in mind if you have GED vouchers, keep an eye on when they're about to expire and try to remember to send them in to get the expiration date extended about a month before that expiration date. And then that will mean you can get that easier. There's no gap when that GED voucher is not available, and it will make things easier for you to make sure that you have that available for your students when needed. Let's go to the next slide. And then finally, I want to share a little bit of information with you about the High Seas Advisory Group that we're forming. This Friday is the due date to apply for the application or for the High Seas Advisory Group. This group we're hoping will be a 9-member team. It will be led by a representative from Literacy Action Network, representative from Minnesota Department of Education, representative from the Department of Corrections. And this 9-member group will really help us to lead our High Seas or High School Equivalency Assessment System. We also expect that representatives from GED Testing Service and Educational Testing Service, or ETS, will also be participating in this group. This group will meet once a month, just for an hour, from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, the third Wednesday of the month, starting in November. And there is an application that you can fill out, and I will enter that application link right now in the chat. You should be able to see the link to the application form. I highly encourage, if you're interested in this and want to know more about the tests and are interested in how these tests are implemented in the state, wanting to make sure that they're implemented fairly, done well, then I encourage you to apply. Let's go to the next slide, and I can talk a little bit more about the purpose of this group. So this group will really advise the Department of Education and the Department of Corrections and Literacy Action Network on the test implementation. They'll give advice on how the test should be implemented across the state. What are some communications needs that exist across the state, whether we're talking about adult education programs, test centers, testers, our K-12 partners, our post-secondary partners, our employer partners, or others? What's some professional development that's needed? And this will really help identify professional development needs and help us make sure that they get addressed through various opportunities. And then also, what are some policy and technical assistance needs that adult education programs, test centers, or others may need? And this group will be so instrumental in helping to make sure that we do a good job at implementing the test, and that programs and testers have a way to talk and get information to us, and that we take your advice in terms of implementing the assessments. Also, will be, as you can see with the name The High Seas, there'll be a fun opportunity to create a lot of nautical puns. Now, you don't have to be great at nautical puns to join the group. That's just an added dad joke benefit, maybe, as you go through this process. But I really hope that you do consider joining this advisory group. And if you have any questions, you can fill out the application and/or contact me. And I'll put my email in the chat. Thank you all so much. And then I think at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Jody.
Great. Thank you, Brad, for those updates. I just have one more kind of general update to give the group before we move on to some other content. So in terms of our SID portfolio submission, I will admit that we have not moved very much further ahead on this than what I told you about in July. But I'm just going to remind you what is the work that's underway and commit to making sure that we do move forward on this as we can. So as you know, and I know some of you are anxiously awaiting this, we are working on a process so that you will be able to submit a portfolio section by section or domain by domain. So currently you have to submit the whole thing for review, and then our reviewers review the whole thing, and we rate the whole thing a pass or a not pass. And we are working towards a change where you will be able to submit the domains individually. And we know that that will be helpful so that students can receive partial completion as they work through the process. Again, this is a teaser, a screenshot of what will be coming. Instead of, once this is turned on, instead of having one submit button for the whole portfolio, you will have individual submit buttons for each of the domains, one for English language arts, one for math, one for science, etc. And then we on our end will have the capacity to just review each domain separately and pass it separately. So you could have a student who, you know, they finished social studies, you submit that, it gets reviewed and it gets passed, while at the same time they are continuing to work on science or ELA. So as we said in July, the process in SID exists. The capacity in SID has been created, but it is not turned on yet. Really, a little bit of the bottleneck is that we have to completely rethink how the logistics of the review process and the work of the review team, how is that going to be organized? So that's really something that honestly we just have not had time to take on as we tread water this fall and, you know, try not to drown. But we are still on track and planning to try to tackle that yet this fall. So please stay tuned on that. All right, so I'm going to pause right here. I think we've been mostly having some dialogue and answering some questions as we go along, but I'll just take a second to pause and see if anybody has any questions about any of those updates or announcements or kind of some of those ongoing things. I don't see anything popping up. So, all right, I'm going to keep us going. So at this point, we want to continue talking about our diploma tasks. And I believe that we have Christine with us now after some internet outage issues. So Christine, if you are ready, I will hand it off to you.
Yes, my internet went back up, and this has happened to me maybe 4 times. It happened during one of my grad classes last week, which was a major bummer. But so hi everybody. It's great to be at the first adult diploma working group meeting of this new school year, and we still have diploma tasks being developed. And as a reminder, 16 culminating adult diploma tasks, ELA, math, science, and social studies. This summer, Stephanie Summers debuted her social studies tasks, her 4 tasks there, and now we have the science tasks. And Chris Kloss created the science tasks, but they had class today and were unable to attend, so I am here presenting their tasks. I am the project manager. We have a group of task writers. Christy and Jen are on this call, I believe. And we have a support team. Patsy's always there supporting. You know, questions go to Brad and Jody, and we do have content area experts looking over each set of tasks and giving feedback to the writers. Next slide. So, oh, I forgot to change July. It should say October. Science and ELA and math are in progress. I've been having good conversations with Christy, and I know that Jennifer is active in her math tasks. And now we have the science tasks. So again, to review the process is the writers develop drafts. They review them with a content area expert. Revisions are made. They're submitted to me. I format the tasks and place them into a student-facing and teacher-facing template and organize the materials in folders on Google. I check to make sure that I've done everything, that everything is accurate, and then we post them on the Atlas website. Next slide. So the details, each task in Google Drive has a teacher-facing document and a student-facing document. So there's something that the teacher can use that gives information about what a student should know going into the task, links to the materials. The student-facing document is something you would just hand to the student. It includes a checklist and makes very clear the materials the student needs and what the student needs to do to complete the task. All materials and links are also included in the Google Drive folder. And these are all on the Atlas website. They're view-only folders, so you will be forced to do forced copy. These are multi-part tasks with reading, writing, listening activities in all of the areas so far. Aligned with CCRS, although I didn't change this one either. The social studies and the science are aligned with the social studies and science strategies that they need to be aligned with. There is potential to add CCRS standards, and that is articulated in each task. And again, we are having these tasks reviewed by subject matter teachers. Next slide. So as big reminders, these tasks are for assessment of competencies, not instruction. So for example, in one of the science tasks, it's about using the scientific method and studying an experiment and coming up with kind of a formatting a new experiment. And the student needs to understand the steps of the scientific method before doing the task. The task is not to teach the scientific method. So prerequisite content knowledge is stated, and that would be developed in ABE instruction. These tasks are opportunities for students to demonstrate competencies, but it's up to the teacher to determine proof of proficiency has been achieved by the student. And there are some guidelines in these tasks. At times there are rubrics for the teacher and the student to use. Any of this content really could be used in GED instruction. These are not required tasks by anyone. They are out here. They are there for use or to use even as models if you are looking at developing your own program tasks for students to use. Next slide. So previously, we had the social studies tasks under social studies in the resource library for Atlas, but now it has its own icon. So if you go to the Atlas website, that is our old logo. Some of you may have noticed we have a brand new logo. You will now click on Adult Diploma High School Equivalency, and then you will get the pull-down menu, and it will say English, Math, Science, or Social Studies. And you click on the Science, and that will take you, this happens to be the Earth and Space Science task. There will be in the future, and Jody will talk more about that in the future, I believe, more resources and things that are going to be housed under this tab and will be password protected. That is part of the future that will be set up. Next slide. So just some quick highlights about Chris's tasks. One of the tasks, the physical science task, is to actually create a Rube Goldberg machine, a simple machine. It's going to be really good for your hands-on learners, where they can construct a simple machine and talk about the transfer of energy in that machine. The nature of science and engineering takes students through the scientific method. They need to know it before they work with it, but they are going to be given an opportunity to study an experiment that was done and to do some analysis. And the life science, adaptations, and extinction, this is actually focused on Minnesota. Students will look at, choose a species from Minnesota that may be endangered, threatened, and take a look at some different facets of that species. And then finally, the Earth and Space Science task involves students actually looking at going in and using a special kind of calculator and doing some thinking and creating and presenting their own carbon footprint. So really a wide variety of activities and content. And again, I think you can see that much of this could be great for GED students as well. Last slide. So there is Chris, and they had a lot of fun creating these tasks. And they used to teach ESL, but now they're teaching GED and primarily science. So it was a nice way for them to get involved in this work. Subject matter reviewers, mainly Sarah Turnbull, she's a science teacher at Robbinsdale Adult Academic Program. Andy also eyeballed some of these. Anything involving physics, no doubt, Andy had his eyes on. And so we do have other people looking and making suggestions, giving feedback, and things are being revised. If you have any comments, questions about this process, please contact me, and we will continue to debut more tasks as they come.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Christine. This is really exciting to have another set of these tasks for you all to be able to use. I just want to reiterate and emphasize a couple of things that Christine said. Remember, these are resources for you to use in your programming. You may find them very useful for GED students, which is great. But also the idea behind designing these was to give programs some additional resources and options when you are working on a student towards an adult diploma and you need some evidence to put in the portfolio when ABE instruction is the completion option. So these are absolutely not required, they're not required tasks, but they are options for you to use in that scenario when ABE instruction is the completion option. Oh yeah, and thanks, Christine. At the November 5th PD event, there will be more information about these diploma tasks. So be looking for that presentation. All right, I'm going to keep us going then. Thanks again, Christine. And Christine's email is here on this slide for anybody who wants to reach out about more detail about the tasks or the process. All right, at this point, I want to give you some updates and information about current portfolios under review and a few recommendations and tips that have come from the review group or the review team. So in the queue currently, there are 5 portfolios under review, which is fewer than sometimes when I've given that update. So FYI to those of you who are waiting on the status of a review. Still true though that 30 days is generally what you should expect. Please, please, please tell your students when you submit the portfolio that it could be 30 days. We've been doing better recently, sometimes at turning them around a little more quickly than that, but sometimes we need that full 30-day window. As of last week, there were a total of 891 standard adult diploma graduates since the inception of this project. I'm feeling like when we hit 1,000, we need to do some kind of celebration or something, so we're getting there. A few tips that have come up, or kind of tips, reminders, recommendations that are coming up from the review team to be shared with you all. Please remember, this is particularly for ELA and math. If you're using ABE instruction as the completion option, please know and remember that your reviewers are going to be asking these questions when we review. So the first question the reviewer is going to ask is, which level E standard is being demonstrated here? And we really, at this point, recommend just choose one level E standard, because it just makes it more straightforward, both for you to demonstrate that, or to decide whether or not the student has demonstrated mastery, and also for us as reviewers to look for demonstration of mastery of one specific standard. There could be 2, but please don't list 4 or 5. Tell us specifically, which level E standard are they demonstrating here? And then, so that's the first question we're going to ask as reviewers. And then we're going to ask, can I see clear evidence that the student has mastered and demonstrated competency of this particular standard? So we wanted to give a shout out to the folks at the correctional facility at Faribault who have given us a recent example of a way to organize evidence that is really helpful. So this is an example of like the first page of a piece of evidence that was submitted for geometry, and it lists right there the single specific standard using formula volumes for these 4 different shapes. And then it gives us guidance as reviewers to specifically where in this evidence we can see, where can we see that the student knows how to find the volume of a cylinder? Where can we see the student knows how to find a volume for a pyramid? So of course, it's a little easier to do that for math than it is for ELA, which we recognize that. But this is just a really great example of how this kind of organization and explanation makes it really straightforward for us as reviewers to be able to say, yep, I can see the student has mastered that particular standard. So kind of related to this, a recommendation that has come out of our review team recently is, you know, please kind of assume that we don't know very much about your program or about your instruction. So it is really helpful to have explanations of your evidence and your assignments, like the example you just saw on the previous slide. In some cases, you might need to explain why and how this evidence demonstrates mastery. Sometimes, particularly for the instructor, it seems so clear, but as your reviewers who don't know anything about your class or your program, it's not always that clear to us. Also, be careful about including too much evidence. We sometimes get portfolios you know, with a PDF piece of evidence for one area that's more than 30 pages, and it's just really tough as a reviewer to know what to look at. So if you don't need to include all of that, please don't. If you feel like it kind of all holds together and it's sort of one piece of evidence that just has a lot to it, and you're choosing to include the whole thing, please let us know as reviewers where specifically we should look, what page, what problems, like the example that I just showed you. So I'm pausing there for just a second to see if anybody has any questions about that. Review team members, anything else that you want to sort of chime in and say about recent reviews? Otherwise, I'm going to keep us going.
Jody,
Yes.
we did have a question earlier, not related to this, but about where people could find the recording of this meeting later.
Yes. Yes. Good question. We will post the link to this recording in the Schoology group and on Mighty Networks. I'm pausing just a little bit because I know we can put it in Schoology. I believe we can also put it in Mighty Networks. So making a note to myself.
I can put a link to it.
Yeah, great. Okay. All right. I'm gonna keep us going then. Okay. So kind of the last main piece of content that we have to talk about today is to continue what we started talking about in July, which is thinking more specifically about using high school transcripts, high school credits, and high school courses as the completion option in the Standard Adult Diploma portfolio. So in July, and you will remember if you were here with us, we took some time to talk specifically about math credits and Shout out to the review team who weighed in. I had some good back and forth with the folks up in Northwest Service Co-op, which was kind of the impetus for this whole conversation. And then you all chimed in during that July working group meeting. And that resulted in finally an actual document that I hope will be useful to you. So you should see that document as in the materials section here in this webinar. It is also in the Schoology group in the folder for materials for today's webinar. Please know that that document is not intended to address every single scenario you might come across in terms of a student transcript, but instead it's meant to be sort of a starting point. It's meant to address kind of some of the most common scenarios, basically, you know, classes when you see things like algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 on a transcript, it gives you basic guidance about how to interpret those things for use in the portfolio. So we're not going to take any more time to talk about math today, but if you want to dig into that a little bit more, or if you missed it in July, you might want to go back and listen to that section of the recording of our working group webinar from July. So that is available in Schoology. So this time we're going to keep going with that work and focus on science. So the review team has started thinking about and compiling some thoughts and ideas to put together some guidelines for transcript analysis, specifically around science. For now, what we've gathered for you is a draft. I do not have an official document to share with you yet. The goal would be to get your input today, make some changes if we need to, and then have have a document ready to share at the upcoming working group. So I apologize, that feels kind of slow. I know this is feeling like a bit of a slow process, but again, treading water and trying to keep the work moving forward, even if it isn't particularly quick. So again, as I said with math, what we're working on here are guidelines for science courses. We know that this is not going to cover every single scenario, every single course, every single transcript, but are hoping that it gives you sort of a good starting point when you're looking at a transcript and thinking about science for the adult diploma. So what we found when we started doing this process for science is it's actually not as straightforward as math. And the reason is because math is a progression, right? We know that students have to, they go from pre-algebra and then geometry and then algebra 2, typically, right? And you can't go on to higher math until you pass the math before. We're realizing science doesn't work that way, right? That these are sort of discrete, independent areas of science. They're not necessarily in a progression, and students could take them in different order. So this grid that we're working on here for science isn't quite as neat and short as the one for math, but this is where we've landed here over the next couple of slides. So this grid represents if you've got, you're looking at a transcript for a student and you see 3 or more total science courses. Best case scenario, those courses are named in such a way that they clearly align. So earth and space science or environmental science, biology or life science, chemistry or physical science. If you've got those 3, then you're good. That can be used for the entire area, for the entire domain, all 4 areas within science, if they have 3 courses that are titled in those clear ways. A note about the nature of science and engineering, basically where we have landed on that is nature of science and engineering is not necessarily taught as an independent course, but it's it is sort of underpinning knowledge, foundational knowledge for all science work. And so we are making the assumption here that that nature of science and engineering area can be completed by any high school science course. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more about that as we keep going here. So that is absolute best case scenario. Your student has 3 courses and they are named in very clear ways. We know that sometimes you might see a student has science courses that are not named in content specific ways. So if you have a student who has 3 courses, but they are labeled Science 9, 10, and 11, then we can say, okay, that definitely completes nature of science and engineering because we know this student took science courses and passed them, but we don't know for sure which content areas those covered. So this is a scenario where you would need to get more information from the district that produced that transcript. So those are the scenarios where you have a student that has 3 or more courses with passing grades in science on their transcript. This grid represents if you have a student who has 2 total courses in science with passing grades on their transcript. So this top line shows, again, the scenario where those are named in transparent ways. So if a student has Earth and Space Science and biology, then you can assume, again, you can assume because they've passed some high school science, we're going to consider nature of science and engineering completed. And in that scenario, also life science and Earth and Space Science. The middle row here, if they have 2 science courses, if they just have biology and chemistry, then as with all of these, we can assume nature of science and engineering is completed. We can assume life science is completed. We can assume physical science is completed, but there's a question mark here about Earth and Space Science. We do know that at least currently in many districts, Earth and Space Science content is taught in 8th grade. However, we do expect in this particular scenario that you would confirm that with the district. And then the bottom row here shows the scenario where you've got Science 9, Science 10. Again, you can definitely use that as completion of nature and science and engineering, but you're going to need to get more information from the district about what other content was covered in those 2 courses. And then this last grid is guidance around if you have a student that has 1 science course on their transcript that they passed. So again, in all of these scenarios, regardless of what that science was, you can use that as evidence of completing nature of science and engineering. In addition, if that 1 course is titled Earth and Space Science or Environmental Science, then obviously you can use it for Earth and Space Science. If that 1 course is biology or life science, you can use that for life science. Again, there's this question of did they already complete Earth and Space Science content possibly before they went into high school? You'd need to check with the district for sure, but if you can get confirmation from the district, then you could use that as well. And if they just have 1 science course that's titled Science 9, again, use it for nature of science and engineering, but you need to get more info from the district about what other area of content was taught in that course. So I'm going to pause here for a second. I would love some feedback here about how this lands for you in terms of those of you who have experience looking at high school transcripts, those of you who've been thinking about this recently, those of you who have used high school credits as the completion option for science in portfolios. Does this sound like it makes sense? Does it sound reasonable? What questions does this bring up? I'd love some feedback about whether you're thinking this is great, perfect, awesome, or whether you're puzzled or skeptical. Okay, thank you, Christy. Christy's saying it makes sense based on transcripts you've seen. That's helpful. Oh, I think I saw a hand up, I thought. I'm not sure, maybe it went back down. It'd be really helpful to me, actually, if a few of you kind of still confirm you're with me and it makes sense. Oh, I saw a question and then it disappeared for me. Oh, Science 9, is Science 9 physical science? That's a good question. I think that sounds reasonable, sounds familiar to me. I think that did not come up when we were talking about common science course names, so we did not list it on this document. I think that physical, yeah. I'm not sure about Science 9 being the same as physical science, obviously. And I think that question is not answered by this document. Oh, I'm seeing some other questions come up, but I can't quite keep up with them.
We have, would you like some help tracking the questions, Jody?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you, Astrid.
Okay, and we also have Andy's hand up. Andy, I've unmuted you. If you're asking or chiming in on the Science 9, go ahead. If not, we'll wait just a minute.
Yeah, it is very common that Science 9 is physical science, but when we went over this document, we brought up the fact that it's not guaranteed that that's what they're going to do in Science 9. So that's why we didn't list it that way. So as Amy put it, probably most districts do use physical science as Science 9, but not all districts. So you have to be a little careful on that. And then Jody, I sent you the question directly that I didn't put out to the whole everybody, that I wanted to confirm that because I'm confused from what we talked about on Friday.
I'm sorry, Andy, I'm not able, with presenting my screen, I'm not able to see the chat.
Okay.
So go ahead. Let's be transparent to folks that we are very much still figuring this out. So yeah.
Okay. Could you back up a slide, the two courses? Sure. Because we talked about that the way the science is written, it's courses, not years, right? Not credits.
Yes.
So if we have two science courses like earth science and biology, life science, we've got the three completed: life science, earth science, and nature and science and engineering. Great, no problems. But if we look at the next one down, we have two science courses. It covers life science and physical science and the nature of science. But I thought we wanted a third course, even though earth and space science is normally in 8th grade, that we still needed 3 total courses to cover all 3, the entirety of science. Am I incorrect in that assumption? That was what I thought we talked about.
Yeah, we talked about that, but this is where science gets created, right?
Right, yep. Because it's courses. If they had biology and life science first semester, biology or life science second semester, chemistry first semester, chemistry second semester, whatever, then that's more than 2 courses, even though it's two different things, but there's 4 courses because they did 4 semesters.
Yep.
But if we only have 2 pieces of evidence on the transcript, I thought we weren't going to cover all 3.
All 4, you mean?
Well, yeah, the 3 plus the nature of science and engineering.
Yep. Yeah, I think that we did not completely settle that question, and we may need to think a little bit. We may need to clarify that before making a final version of this document.
Right.
Yep.
So I mean, it looks good, but we do want to cover that earth and space science because it usually is in 8th grade, but there'd need to be some other course that could be related to science somehow to get the 3.
Yep.
I think. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Andy.
Yep.
Are there other questions in the chat here, Astrid, that we should address?
So we had a question about whether meeting the MCA science test meets these requirements, and then Amy chimed in. Thank you, Amy. That Yes, passing the MCA science is listed on the completion options doc as covering all areas of science. So if the student has passed MCA, then this is moot.
Yep.
Let's see. Number of comments. I think that is the final question. Laura's saying it would be helpful if school systems could have consistent course requirements for content instead they keep us guessing and questioning when students have changed districts numerous times.
Yes.
Very true.
That is true.
And then I'm not sure which comment Brian is referring to. He says the first half of the year is chemistry and the second half is physics. It's not nature, science, and engineering.
Not
Unmute, Brian?
sure. Yeah, I see. It looks like Kelly also has her hand up. I wonder if maybe we should go to Kelly and then Brian after that, if you'd like to ask more about that, Brian.
Oh, go ahead, Kelly. I've unmuted you. You'll need to unmute on your end as well.
Oops. Okay, you can hear me, right? Okay.
Yep.
I have the Kennedy High School credit status worksheet here with me. And what they do is you have to do physical science, biology, chemistry, or physics, and a STEM course. So you need 3 semesters of physical science, 3 of biology, and 3 of chemistry, physics, and 1 semester or trimester, excuse me, of STEM. So they're on trimesters. I don't know if that helps.
Okay.
But they do, you have to have a trimester of STEM. So the school is on trimesters. So 3 trimesters of physical science, 3 trimesters of biology, 3 trimesters of chemistry/physics, and 1 trimester of a STEM class.
Okay, so Kelly, are you asking how to use that in the adult diploma, or are you just offering that as an example?
I'm just offering that as
High
information.
school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
we will get students that'll come in with that, and then we'll have to decide, how that fits into the program, the adult diploma program. But yeah, just want you to know, and I know there's physical science that they're talking about as well, but that is before, because it's earth science, physical science. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly.
And then Brian says that he is referring to Science 9.
Is there a question? Do you have a remaining question about that, Brian? I guess I wasn't ever clear exactly if there was a question, and if so, specifically what it was. I wonder if the question is, does Science 9 always count for physical science? Which in my mind, the answer to that is no, but I'm not sure if that's the question or not. So maybe, guess we can keep going, but you can weigh in on that if you want, Brian. Is there another hand up, Astrid?
Let's see. Yes, Lee. Lee's hand is up. I'll unmute you, Lee. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Lee. You have to unmute on your end, Lee. We don't hear you yet.
Is the problem with physical science being assumed at 9th grade is it used to be that way a number of years ago, but with the state testing for science, school districts began to re-evaluate the placement of science, physical science versus biology or life sciences, and they usually went 9, 10 in that order. Several schools switched them around, so assuming that 9th grade is physical science anymore just doesn't really hold water pretty much.
Great, thank you, Lee. That's helpful to have. So I know you have a bit of a historical perspective, so that's really helpful. And I do, I think that is one thing we need to acknowledge here, that this whole conversation is made more complicated by the fact that you could have a student who has a high school transcript from 2 years ago, and you could have a student who has a high school transcript from 30 years ago. And those are going to be quite different. So yep, that is an additional sort of complication and barrier that you are up against here. And we recognize it's a heavy lift and it can be a hard task. I'm thinking we should keep going here. We will have a little bit of time at the end probably for some more questions, but I am going to keep us going. Thank you so much to everyone who has weighed in, and thank you for your thoughtful thinking on this. It is not simple, and I want to acknowledge there is sometimes a bit of an art to this as much as a science, so we just do the best we can. So we will commit to circling back to this particular conversation about science and making a document for you that will have that will include these grids. I think we do need to address the question that Andy brought up before producing that document, so stay tuned. But we are going to try to keep moving forward with this work. And hopefully in January or perhaps in April, depending on if maybe our January meeting will dedicate a bunch of time to HiSET and really thinking about HiSET. But sometime in 2022, early 2022, let's do this kind of the same process for social studies. So I will invite you right now, like you did in July, which was really helpful, shift into your social studies brain for a second and put in the chat when you're looking at transcripts, what do you see as the title of those high school social studies transcripts? So I see Christy put some in there, world history, geography. What else are you all seeing? When you look at transcripts, what are those social studies courses called? That was really helpful in July when you all listed out science courses. That was where I started with this conversation. So, yep. Okay, same in OSSEO. Maybe there is a little more standardization in terms of social studies courses. Yes, although sometimes courses are just called social studies, so that's a challenging. Yep, that is a challenging scenario. So I'm going to keep us going, but please go ahead and put names of common high school social studies courses in the chat. Yeah, American government. Yeah, good. So again, I want to let you know that we are thinking and hoping over the course of this program year to continue working towards more knowledge, more support, perhaps some training, some materials around using high school transcripts and high school credits in the adult diploma portfolio. We are still thinking, probably, I think this wouldn't start until early next year, but we're thinking about convening a group of folks who have some particular expertise in this area. The goals would be to develop some kind of an FAQ, share some knowledge, develop some specific training that we could have staff go through. And I know that I asked this in July, but I'm going to ask again. Would any of you like to raise your hand to participate in this group? Do you recommend anybody? I know Christy from Northwest Service Co-op volunteered last time. Lee, I think, also was mentioned. I'm not sure, Lee, if you volunteered or somebody else volunteered you. Dan Woodbury's name came up, Dan Woodbury and Robbinsdale. Is there anyone else out there who would like to be a part of that smaller group, or anyone else any other names that come to mind in terms of folks who would be good resources to tap? Yay, I'm glad you're still willing, Christy. All right, so keep thinking. You don't necessarily have to be, a total expert, but if you're somebody who's interested in this, if you have experience of looking at a few high school transcripts and putting those into portfolios, we'd be happy to have your brain included in this group. So keep thinking about that. And then that is all of the content that we have. So we have a few more minutes here. We can have the rest of our time for any other questions that are coming up regarding things that we've talked about today, or other things that we haven't talked about today. We'd be happy to hear any program news if any of you have any announcements or updates or new things that are happening. I just want to again remind you about our next couple of working group dates and make sure that you have those on your calendar, January 24th and April 25th, potentially in person, but you can definitely plan if we don't end up having an in-person meeting on April 25th, we will host a virtual meeting on that day. So please keep that on your calendar. And I just want to say thank you. We know that the adult diploma is a heavy lift sometimes, and maybe even more so. These days, everything feels like a heavy lift. So thank you for all of your work on behalf of your students. We really appreciate that. So I guess I'll go back to this slide for now. We do have a few more minutes. I will open up the floor. If you want any other questions you want to put in the chat, you want to raise your hand, we can unmute. We can go back to talking about science courses a little bit. Melissa, I saw your question and then it disappeared before I got a chance to read it. Astrid, can you help me with that one?
Yes, let me just scroll down. So Melissa says the GED is widely accepted as high school equivalency by colleges and employers. I recently had a student ask how accepted the ADP is by colleges and employers.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I wonder if anyone on the call has any experience with your student who has received a standard adult diploma and what their experience has been. I definitely, obviously, the standard adult diploma is not as well known as the GED. Everybody knows what a GED is, and folks, you know, out in the regular world don't know necessarily what a standard adult diploma is. However, we do sometimes get inquiries in our office, sort of, or I think a few times we've gotten inquiries either from colleges or from employers sort of asking us, hey, is this legit? And we are obviously able to say, yes, it's absolutely legitimate. It is a high school diploma awarded by the Minnesota Department of Education. And in all of those scenarios, that has been perfectly acceptable. To my knowledge, we have never heard of an incident where either a college or an employer refused to recognize it as a valid high school credential, but I don't know for sure that that's never happened. So those are my thoughts. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts or experiences that you want to share about the adult diploma being accepted or not accepted as a valid high school credential.
Hey, Jody, this is Brad.
Yes, go ahead, Brad.
Yep, I concur with everything that you've said. And when we have raised questions, we do, like you were hinting at, we do point them specifically and cite the statute where the standard adult high school diploma is identified and authorized, and that has resolved any question that has come to our office. And so it has been accepted with every inquiry we have received with that citation of the law. Stating that this is a high school diploma.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We always, if we get questions about it, we refer to state statute where it authorizes the Department of Ed to award this diploma. And I think Amy was saying that no problems with it being accepted, but sometimes folks need a bit of an explanation in terms of the transcript, which makes sense. It certainly doesn't look like a high school transcript that people are used to seeing. So yeah, you might want to be prepared to do that kind of advocacy work on the part of your student if need be. So yeah, thank you, everybody. Are there other questions coming up in the chat that we can address?
Yes, let's see. A question from Lee. In SID, on 2 occasions, I have submitted a student's portfolio and for some reason it didn't go through. Has anyone else experienced this happening?
Yeah, good.
So do you know what internet service or what browser you were using?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Lee. I know that has been frustrating. I would also be interested to know, has anybody else had that issue? And I'm also curious what browser you are using, Lee.
I've used a couple different browsers, and that's the problem, is I don't remember which one I used on which occasion. You know, and I was just trying to decipher if it's been my glitch or if it's something as simple as the provider. And I just don't, it bothers me because it holds up students and they get anxious about receiving returns, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, that bothers me too, honestly.
And we have had some technical difficulties here at the college with the computer systems of late also. So that throws another wrench in the works.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good idea to put it out to the group here. Please, will anybody else, if you've had that experience, I think, yeah, my understanding of your experience, Lee, is that you hit submit on your end, but then for some reason, it doesn't show as submitted on our end. And then when you and I had some conversation about it, you hit submit again.
Yeah, and exactly, and I'm pretty methodical as to the procedure I use for submission. I've got a step-by-step process, but then, you know, I am to err as human, you know.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee. Not seeing anybody in the chat who's had that experience, but please do let us know if
That's what I was afraid of.
Sorry, Lee.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's always better to try to blame it on somebody else. Yeah, it looks like a little bit of discussion in the chat, maybe military preferring high school diploma over GED. Don't know if we need anything else to say about any of that or any final questions before we wrap up here. Astrid, can you help me figure out if there's anything else we should address in the chat?
There's no other questions that I am seeing.
Okay. Great. Well, I think we are about at the end of our time here. So for those of you who are still around, thank you so much for all of your work. And I think we can end the recording at this point, and maybe we'll stick